leaning on bureaucrats and corporations that would stand in the way of health freedom. Here's Robert.
While the old media wants to believe it's a leak, like Ed Snowden took a leak, he didn't blow a whistle. we got it covered here on the Robert Scott Bell Show. Mike Adams, my guest, the Health Ranger. He's here to talk about why Edward Snowden might not want to go to Ecuador after all.
Hi, Robert. Thanks for having me back on the show. We've got some exclusive information for the listeners today about the way the United States government runs kidnapping and abduction operations in Ecuador. And for those listening, they might think, come on, that's ridiculous. You're making that up or you're exaggerating. But Ed Snowden needs to know that we actually broke this story in 2009. It's fully documented. It's factually true that the U.S. abducted one individual that we'll talk about. But the real story is that this is an ongoing pattern. They do it over and over and over again. They go in with government operatives into foreign countries like Ecuador, and they basically grab American citizens that they want to take back to the U.S. and throw bags over their heads and stuff them into vans and stuff them on airplanes and fly them back to the U.S.
Now,
so that's the story.
When I heard that Ed Snowden might be going to Ecuador, that's the first thing I thought about, because I remember when you broke this story, we even covered it here on the show, and we talked about the fact that in violation of international law, there was no extradition treaty with Ecuador. They went after your friend Greg Caton. He was dealing with the black salve. This was an ointment that was utilized and is utilized to this day based on some Native American recipes to address topical lesions, skin cancer, in fact.
Yes. When I was living in Ecuador, Greg Caton came to visit me, and I interviewed him at my property there. And he is a very well-informed individual on Amazonian cures and treatments for cancer. And he was selling a salve, a concentration of certain plants, to the U.S. from Ecuador, and the U.S. didn't like that. They don't want consumers to have access to actual cancer treatments. So they dispatched a team, the U.S. State Department dispatched a team of kidnappers to go into Ecuador and then bribe all the necessary local officials, which is pretty easy in Ecuador,
right?
To set up an armed roadblock on Greg Caton's driveway. He was driving home. They met him with numerous men with assault rifles pointed at him, and grabbed him, stuffed him into a van, drove him to Guayaquil, and stuffed him onto an American Airlines airplane, completely outside of law, no court hearing, no due process, no extradition, no diplomatic conversation. This is a complete violation of international law and even American law. So for the U.S. to now say to Hong Kong, "Oh, you guys, you let Ed Snowden go," it makes us question whether you honor the rule of law. You have
right.
To,
well, firsthand that the U.S. government doesn't honor the rule of law internationally with Greg's story,
right?
Which, by the way, if you think it's a one-off, why would the one event, if people would argue, well, that was just an anomaly, why would the one event that they would utilize to violate international law, go to Ecuador, grab a guy, instead of some dangerous terrorist that was actually killing people, you go after a guy who happens to package an herbal salve that is reversing cancer? I mean, that's the one off? Really? That's the one time?
Well, right, exactly. But the story here is so many people in the U.S., they still suffer under the delusion that their government abides by the law. They think that this is a nation of justice and that the government officials follow the law and don't commit criminal acts. Well, in fact, the opposite is actually the case. They are criminals who rarely follow the law. They actually break the law day to day. And there have been other cases. For example, a man named James Malone was kidnapped last year from the Ecuadorian coast. The same kind of operation. U.S. operatives working with the State Department came in, located him, stalked him using surveillance, found out where he lived, and then they kidnapped him, abducted him, which of course is a violation of law in Ecuador as well as the United States, and they got him on a plane and got him back to the United States, where they then prosecuted him for a cocaine charge that they set up on him before he fled the U.S. to try to escape that injustice that was put onto him. So there's another case, and I'm getting word that there are many, many more, that this is a routine operation, and it happens in Mexico as well as Ecuador, that U.S. operatives go into Mexico, and it's probably happening in Peru and Brazil and many other countries. U.S. operatives go there and just kidnap the people they want and take them back to the United States.
Mike, is there any pattern in terms of why they go after or choose these folks? Whether you say it's a cocaine charge, I mean, is there any backstory emerging here as far as a pattern? With Greg, we know, because of Natural News right here on the Robert Scott Bell Show, we know the great disdain our government, if it could be called that right now, currently has for any, let's say, alternative or natural, non-chemotherapy, non-radiation, non-surgical cure for cancer. So they become public enemy number one. I've often joked that if Osama bin Laden had claimed to have a cure for cancer, he would have been found in 24 hours. Instead, they claim 10 years later they find him, but that's another story. So in these other cases that seem to be emerging, are there any patterns that you're seeing?
No, not that I can tell. The only pattern is insanity by the government, complete lawlessness. In this case with Greg Caton, they actually had they got him red listed by Interpol, and Interpol is, of course, the International Criminal Bulletin, and if you're red listed on Interpol, then police are looking for you in every nation in the world. And every airline is looking for you. Every customs agent is looking for you. It's like being on the top 10 most wanted lists on the planet. They had Greg Caton put on the list, the red listed by Interpol. And there was Caton right next to war criminals and serial murderers and just the most heinous criminals you can imagine. And then there's Greg Caton, herbalist. Yeah. But they did that. Yes. That's what they did. And this was done by the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations, the OCI, working through the U.S. State Department, which has the ability to get anyone red listed on Interpol. So there's discussion even right now of whether they're going to have Snowden red listed. They could have him red listed instantly if they want him to. Right. For again, we talk about it in terms of not a leak, but an actual whistleblowing of, hey, your government is violating the Constitution. That's a whistleblower. He wasn't revealing, based on what I've seen, secrets to China or Russia. It was specific to this. Now, how bizarre is the U.S. government, Mike? We've covered this. The CDC still sending money to a criminal that's evidently like on an FBI top 10 wanted list. They're sending him money because he is, I guess, supposedly responsible for some studies that the CDC uses to claim that vaccines don't have anything to do with autism. This guy, I think, Tor Paulson. It's just further proof that it is a total criminal operation. When I first published a story about Greg Caton back in 2009, many people thought that just couldn't possibly be true. They said the government doesn't do that. This is all fiction. Or a conspiracy theory, whatever. Well, now all of this spy news has come out. The surveillance spy grid, the NSA, they're reading your emails, listening to your phone calls. This has all come out. So now there's no question that this is the way the government operates. So suddenly, looking back at this story from 2009, it is more believable by the mainstream crowd to say, yeah, well, maybe the U.S. does actually go into other countries and abduct American citizens through kidnapping operations. And they do. I can tell you factually, the U.S. government under Obama does exactly that over and over and over again. So any claim that they are following the rule of law is a complete joke, a cruel joke.
Well, this is absolutely, it's one Greg Caton, but now you're talking about a series of events or people that were kidnapped in this way in violation of international law in areas where there is no extradition treaty. You see now, as the pattern has emerged, And, I grew up in a country at a time when we had the Cold War. We used to look at the Soviet Union as the evil empire. They are doing things beyond the law. It doesn't exist. In America, we stand for what is right and true. Now, there may be people here that believe that and believe that they'd like a government that would do that. But it seems that, and I'd say probably beyond seems now, the evidence is coming out that this government is lawless.
It is lawless. This is the real danger here, is that we have allowed the government to abandon the rule of law. And once you do that, there's no limit to how far they will go. Mm-hmm. This will end up with them firing up the gas chambers or something, another Holocaust type event, because that's where it always leads throughout history. When governments have no limits, that's where they always go. And so the limits are no longer respected by this government. The people no longer demand that their government follow the rule of law. So you've got Democrats and Republicans now saying, well, we should let the NSA spy on us because it's keeping us safe. All right, those people are not Americans. They should all have their passports revoked, and they should be marched out of the country and kicked out to Cuba or someplace like that. They're not Americans. So people like McCain, not an American. Feinstein, not American. I don't know, Michael Moore, people like that, Franken, Senator Al Franken, who are defending this police state. They're not Americans, okay? And they shouldn't be senators, and they shouldn't have any position of power whatsoever. They should be, their power should be revoked.
Well, the basis.
No, go ahead,
Mike. The basis of saying they're not an American would be the basis of the rule of law based on the Constitution and the limitations placed on government by it. And the Fourth Amendment is one of them. It hasn't been revoked as far as we know, although the Patriot Act did some damage to it. But since that time, what Bush did, the left complained about it. When Obama came in, suddenly they became silent.
Well, right. And these very same people like Feinstein, they say, well, Ed Snowden took an oath and he violated his oath by sharing these secrets. Well, didn't Feinstein take an oath to defend the Constitution? Didn't Obama take the same oath? Doesn't every member of Congress take that oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic? They all took that oath. And they violate it just as easily as exhaling. I mean, they violate it every single day. Every time they vote for another law, another bailout, another handout, another restriction on our rights, they violate the Constitution that they swore an oath to. So you want to talk about, real treason? Mm-hmm. It's the people running the country.
Yeah, it's not what Snowden did. I mean, he's saying, "Hello, America, you're being spied on." That's a whistleblower. Does anybody know the definition anymore at MSNBC? Oh, I'm sorry, they're owned by GE. Wait a second.
Right.
Oh, that's war-making machinery. So, Mike, where is this investigation going? I know you've got some interviews scheduled. You're supposed to host Alex Jones maybe next week. What do we have to look forward to here?
Well, I'm gathering more information about this story of the U.S. government running abductions and kidnapping operations in South America. And I've got contacts, of course, in Ecuador since I used to live there. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of glad I don't live there now, because maybe they would try to abduct me. I'm probably safer in Texas.
Yes.
Because at least in Texas, there is U.S. law, where it's interesting, when the U.S. operatives go outside the U.S., they don't have to abide by any law, it seems, so they can get away with more outside the U.S.
Right.
But anyway, we're going to develop the story, and we'll report more on it probably next week.
Well, we look forward to following up with you as well, Mike. Appreciate Natural News, and you hear the Robert Scott Bell Show right here on Natural News Radio, where we're not conflicted by, let's say, interests that are not those of the people who love liberty, who believe in a constitutionally limited government. So we'll be anxious to hear as this story evolves. Everybody, check it out, naturalnews.com. If you're not already getting email updates every day, just check it out. And, of course, you can listen to this show Monday through Friday, 3 to 5 in the Eastern time zone in the afternoon, and downloadable as a podcast MP3 after the airing. So, Mike, we look forward to having you back on. In fact, we're going to cover another story after the break related to the computer technology. It's getting bizarre at Google and all of these places.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Robert, and I look forward to the next segment with you.
All right, check it out. The links are up at robertscottbell.com. Link it through to Natural News Radio Monday through Friday, 3 to 5 in the afternoon Eastern Time. Downloadable for free at Natural News Radio Archives. After that, Mike Adams returns after this break.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.